Merry Election Day to all, and to all a very anxious night as we await results from the big one at the top of the ticket, the presidential race, Donald Trump versus former Vice President Joe Biden, all the way down to the school boards in our neighborhoods. Tonight on a NJ Press Pass, we bring you a South Jersey specific election results show and what's been happening in our region all day. So with me tonight is Ben Dworkin, founding director of the Rowan University Institute of Public Policy. He is a political scientist who studies South Jersey, and he is teaching campaigning for Rowan University, usually based at the Glassboro campus, but they're remote now because of COVID. And also with me is my incredibly knowledgeable colleague, Carol Camegno. She is also joining the conversation. She's covered a dozen election nights in her time. I said a dozen, I meant dozens, and I'm sure she appreciates me saying that. And she's been with the Courier-Post for a very long time. How are you both? Welcome.
I'm well, thank you.
Are you on the edges of your seats right now?
I'm a kid in a candy store, Carly. This is what I live for.
That's how I feel too. And I mean, this year is really exciting. Before the show, Ben and I were kind of already getting excited about 2021 because it's the governor is up for re-election, the whole state house. That one's going to be a fun one if you're an election dork like us.
Right.
But today, Carol and I and a couple others in our newsroom have been all over South Jersey. I stopped by last night. The Camden County Office of Election was the Camden County Elections and Archive Center. And you can see people wrapped around on the side of the building waiting to get in for they're mostly a line of people who lost their ballots and need new ones. And they had a line of cars there. That was their drive-up, drop-off area. There's a real hustle and bustle in there. Last night at like 3:55 before they close at 4 o'clock. Today, I was over at the Gloucester County Office of Elections around like 2 o'clock. A whole different scene. So slow, very chill. Counting was already finished. So Carol, where did you go today? And what did you see out there? Was it the same that I saw?
Well, I went from Camden County, then up into Burlington. So I started in Cherry Hill and Camden, basically going to the polls, going outside the polls to see what the turnout might be early in the day. And so I went to Camden, Cherry Hill, Willingboro, and Evesham were the main places that I traveled. I did not see any lines like you saw yesterday at the Camden County Board of Elections. I did have one fellow who lost his ballot, misplaced it. He did not go to a county board of elections. He went today to vote at his polling place instead. Gotcha. So we didn't see any waiting lines at all.
Yeah, I checked in with Camden County and Gloucester County to see if there were any issues of voter intimidation, if there were any protests. No voter intimidation was reported up to like 4 o'clock in those areas. And the only protest that went on was at Washington Township High School. That was a peaceful protest. They were far back from the actual polling location. Seemed like there were no problems. I mean, from what we prepared for. Ben, does that surprise you? Like what we just came back to report for you?
Well, 2020 has been such an incredible election year with a lot of different surprises that I think a lot of the observers like us were anticipating worst case scenarios. And we spent a great deal of time talking about what would happen if we saw voter intimidation like we did in the 1981 gubernatorial election here in New Jersey. What if we saw other kinds of people with guns, people protesting, people getting too close to each other in a very hotly contested election? And the fact that we did not see that, I think, is a great tribute to the citizens of New Jersey.
I'm thankful that that didn't happen in our area, just for safety, the fact that we wouldn't have to then go out and cover it. I did see photos, and of course, I didn't verify them myself, but there were photos floating around from Philly of National Guard who's already stationed there at some areas, just kind of keeping an eye on things. But I'm sure that we'll have some reports on that later. Do you think that like any unrest could still pop up later? I mean, we are at 6 o'clock. We're 2 hours away from the polls closing.
Sure. I mean, look, there's always a chance of unrest when something's this heated, and the rhetoric can be very heated. So if somebody starts, one spark is all you need to get people agitated. And so we'll have to, hopefully in the next few hours, we won't see that. But we should expect that this is going to go long. This is going to take a few days nationally for several states around the country to count all of their vote by mail ballots. And I think because people will be waiting, because politicians are going to be asked to comment on what's happening while we're waiting, things could get riled up. So even if New Jersey gets through between now and when the polls close, around the country, there could be a different situation.
So speaking of election results, this election night is actually going to be fairly regimented when results are released. So here's what I learned this week, which I'm shocked about, because usually Carol can tell you, we would spend every moment from like right before polls close until something is called on a race that we're covering inside an elections office, getting every time they update the returns, we'd be there writing, But now at 8 p.m., they're going to just dump results, everything that was counted in New Jersey from the last 10 days. So everything that they've counted in the last 10 days, because they were allowed to count ahead of time. And that's everything that's come in so far. So, and I think some might actually do a second dump from, what they were able to count after the polls closed to like 11 o'clock. So we're going to have a pretty big idea, maybe, of what's happening here. But Carol, before, just tell us a little bit more about like what we usually go through on an election night, and if this like one-time dump of results is really going to throw you for a loop, because it has me thinking like, well, what else do I do tonight?
Okay, well, I wanted to interject something about that.
Please.
Anyway, in Burlington County, they have told me that they will have their first report sometime between 8:30 and 9. Will be all the ballots counted as of that time, all of the mail-ins. They will likely have another one between 11:30 and midnight. They're not exactly sure of the time, but somewhere in that range. So I'm not sure statewide how that's going to impact other counties. You're saying that maybe statewide there'll be something shortly after 8 p.m. Is that correct?
I know Camden and Gloucester counties will definitely be. They already have it queued up. Everything that they counted is ready to go. They're going to hit a button. It's going to upload right to the web. So I'm going to be there like refreshing.
It'll be available on the Burlington County website, as I'm sure it will be available on those websites.
Right.
So our viewers out there can look sometime, I would say, after 8:30 to see what those results may be. And maybe there'll be another one sometime later in the evening, but probably by midnight.
Gotcha.
Now, so you asked me about on a typical election day or night. Did you want to address the day or nighttime?
Give me the nighttime, because during the day, we're all kind of doing the same thing. If you're not voting, you're a reporter out there trying to talk to someone who is voting. So Carol, how do you usually spend election night?
All right. Well, over the years on election night, oftentimes we have staffed campaign headquarters or campaign event venues where candidates will gather in the evening, usually for one party or another, or for one office that they're running for or another. And we will go and wait for the results there. Then we have other reporters, including myself, who have gone to the county clerk's offices. where the
That's
county
great.
clerk, after the county boards of elections count the ballots, they have to submit those numbers to the clerk. And normally also, because we have regular polling with machines, the clerk gets those results. The town clerks get them and the county clerks get them. And then they put those results in separately because they're machine votes. We're not really confronted that much with that this year. There is one machine in every polling place, but it's reserved only for citizens who are disabled and cannot really fill out a paper ballot correctly. So this is a whole different ballgame. So then what we do is we wait in the evening to see how often they will be updating these vote totals. And sometimes, we're working until 11, 12 or after. We do not always know the winners by that time. It is not abnormal not to have the total vote count, let's say by midnight on election night.
That's absolutely true.
Right, because we have also what's called provisional ballots. So somebody who claims they're a voter or couldn't find theirs, they can go to a poll and they can fill out a provisional. And then that is checked by the Board of Elections. If there's a bigger issue, they can also go to court. So each of the counties has a court set up where they can go and make an appeal to the court. And the court may allow them to fill out a provisional ballot. And then that also has to be checked later. So those provisionals are normally never counted on election night because there has to be too much checking done before for them to decide whether those votes can be counted or not.
Ben, can I ask you, what do you usually do on election night? And just to follow up on what Carol was saying, this year, why are we probably not going to be able to call anything? We will go to bed ignorant.
But it's different in every state. So for the terms of the presidential race, obviously every state has their own way of counting. Places like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, they didn't start counting their vote by mail ballots until this morning. New Jersey, in contrast, as well as places like Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, have been counting for over a week. Florida, they've been counting for almost 4 weeks. So you will hear more complete totals from different states, depending on which state it is. And I just want to point out about New Jersey, there are about 6.5 million registered voters in New Jersey. And in a presidential year like this, we expect about 70% of them to cast ballots. That would mean about 4.5 million votes being cast this year in the presidential race. As of a day or so ago, we had 4 million, just about 4 million ballots already submitted. And so that is sort of stunning. And some counties have their act together because they've been counting a lot of them. Places like Essex County in North Jersey have great, invested in $100,000 machines to be able to open and process these. Others have to do it by hand. But we are going to see record level turnout. In terms of what I do on election night, I'll do it very quickly because I just spent a lot of time on the other thing. It depends. Sometimes I'm talking to media and I'm trying to explain what the heck is going on out there. What do we expect? Those things. Sometimes I try to embed myself in a campaign, just to sit and be a fly on the wall and watch the numbers come in and how these folks who have lived this as the campaign staff have to sweat it out to see what happens. And sometimes, I open a bottle of wine and I sit with my friends and I watch.
Ooh, that sounds so nice. I've never been able to do that on an election night in the last 13 years.
I'm usually working.
So speaking of some turnout numbers I have right now. So these numbers are as of yesterday. 68% of the ballots in Gloucester County. So they had they sent out 220,000 and they already got back and counted 150,000. That's them this afternoon. They're actually running them through the machines there. they're the actual ballots, like votes are being tallied. They're, counting all your little circles on there. So that 68%, that leaves only like 65,000 ballots left to come back today. And their Office of Election said some of those people might be dead. So if a dead person votes, they will find it, or they won't come back. Or someone has moved, hasn't updated their address, they won't come back either. So it's really less than 65,000. So I think that's really interesting. So when the results drop, I'm wondering, when they drop at 8 p.m., Ben, could that be an indicator? Is like 68%? I know it's like 62% of the ballots came back in Camden County. Is that enough for us to like glean anything from those results at 8 p.m.?
No, it's not going to be enough because we know there are so many more. When I said there's going to be 70% of all registered voters, that's generally a number we could apply across for every county. And it doesn't mean it will end there. There's a lot of ballots that are going to come in today. And I think what you saw, actually, in some places, reports that I've heard, are that people simply went to their polling place and hand-delivered their sealed ballot. They had already filled it out, but they didn't want to put it in the mail, and they didn't want to put it in a drop box. They wanted to hand it to a live person, so they walked in. So they were relatively quickly. We had anticipated people having to fill out the provisional ballot, effectively creating a nice paper trail, but it takes time. In a normal year, you're running into a voting booth, click, 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 you vote, you move on, and it's done. Here, it's going to take you 10 minutes just to fill out the ballot. So we were thinking that the lines would be long, but in fact, a lot of people had their ballot, just went in, dropped it off there. And I think that's this is all new. New Jersey has never done this kind of emphasis on vote by mail before. So we're all getting used to it.
Do you think that there's like a safe threshold of like 95%, or should we really, before anything's called, really wait till it's like 99, 100%? This time we're not having precincts. Really, it's, your vote by mail or your provisional. That's it. Should we just wait till everything's tallied to really feel confident in anything being declared?
The places, the major places that do the calling of elections, the Associated Press being the biggest one, some of the major networks, they'll be out there, but they will look and see, in terms of outstanding vote, is it going to make a difference? Now, it always makes a difference in these local races. You're running for town council, 10 votes can make the difference on whether you win or not. So for somebody, but for the big high-profile races, we're talking about the president, the U.S. Senate race we have in New Jersey, the congressional races we have in New Jersey. These could be decided tonight simply because you'll know how much of the outstanding, how much have they not counted? Is that going to be enough to make a difference here? And that's when people will feel confident and call it, as it were.
So I do want to share a comment from Michael Hoffman. He said, the machine live votes are all provisional votes, right? Will we get numbers in that dump of how many of which type were received? I don't, in the initial dump that we're going to get, I'm going to try to answer this the best I can. So to your first question, Michael, there are no machine votes. So all the live votes at the polls, you are correct. They are provisionals. So that means it's paper, or you could bring your vote by mail ballot there and hand it off. I don't think that it'll be broken down into which type of votes they were tonight, because when you submit a provisional ballot, the boards of elections, and this is across the board in our state, they have, I think it's like up to 7 or 10 days. They have to actually do an investigation on those ballots. They run them through, they check signatures. They make sure that you didn't vote under the name of a dead person. They make sure that you are the place you went is actually in your correct district for where you're registered. So they're going to come later anyway. Those aren't going to be counted. I think in the past they told me about like 4 days or so would be the earliest that they would be counted. So I hope that answers your question there.
If I can just jump one thing,
Please.
there are machines. The traditional machines that we've had in the past are available, but not to everyone. You have to specifically be designated with an eyesight disability.
Yeah.
So therefore you can't read a form, but you can go to a machine. And for that small segment of the population, a machine is available to you.
I had heard actually today, I had asked how many people had used in Gloucester County the machine, and they said they thought it was about one person, but a couple people had called and said, well, hey, I broke my finger. Can I use it? And they were like, it's Braille. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Right. And it's not the voting machine that we're used to with like the curtain. I think it's a different type of aid, but that is a machine. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Franchetti, he is John Franchetti. He is at the Gloucester County Board of Elections. He's estimating that everything that was collected today, drop boxes, provisionals, like they think that they can really have a handle on it, investigate everything that comes in, and be ready to have complete results by Thursday or Friday. Whoa, in Gloucester County. So Ben, do you think that New Jersey is really going to be like the fastest state because we had 10 days before Election Day to start counting all these things?
Again, it's a new system for us. So even these boards of elections, that are counting all these ballots, still have to figure out. They just have to get used to it, and the volume is astronomical. And again, sometimes you have machines and high-speed machines. Sometimes you don't, and different counties of the 21 counties in New Jersey, they'll be different. So it is hard to say because it's our really first time in dealing with it, how quickly we will get through it. It's just I don't know whether we can really make that assessment. It's all a little bit new for this for the state in terms of running this process.
So I think we're all warmed up and we're ready to talk about our civics lesson here, the Electoral College. So we've talked about, the high volume of votes and voter turnout's going to be huge. But then there's that other Electoral College in there. Ben, break it down for us. What is this? Does voter turnout matter? We all hope it does. Explain to us, give us that lesson we so desperately need.
Okay, the Electoral College only matters for the presidential race. So voting turnout matters. Even if you live in a very red state or a very blue state, somebody else is running besides the president or people who want to become president, and they need your vote. So yes, everyone should feel their vote matters because there are local races and county races, etc. The Electoral College, here's how we come up with the number. They take the full number of members of the House and they add the 100 members of the Senate. So it's 435 plus 530 plus 100 in the Senate. We have 535 total electoral votes. So you need 270 to win. And that is the magic number for anybody running for president. The way you come up with how does New Jersey, which has 14, is that you add up our number of House of Representatives. We have 12 members of the Congress plus our 2 senators. So it's 12 plus 2. We have 14 electoral votes. And that is applied for every place. What you do if you're running for president is that you try and build a coalition of states in order to come up with 270. What we've seen is that sometimes that can be very narrow. You don't have a lot of places. Sometimes you have a lot of different options. Well, I can win this state or I can win that state, and they're both in play for me. The benefit of the Electoral College is really that we don't just ignore the small states. It disproportionately elevates small states that might have 3 or 5 or 7 or 10 electoral votes, rather than everybody just focus on California, Florida, Texas, New York, and try and get, if we only cared about how many total votes you had, everyone would spend their time in 5, 6 states, because that's where the people are. Because it's an electoral college, you have to spend time in Iowa. You have to spend time in New Hampshire. You have to spend time in a whole bunch of places that are much smaller, because you need them to pull together your coalition. So there you go.
I think we got it now. So electoral college aside, voter turnout, as we said, very high already. And those voters seem really fired up. I talked to some, I mean, they came in their like glitter masks. I talked to some today. Carol talked to some today. But I want to play 2 clips back to back. We're going to hear from some voters who did go to the polls. One is a little voter in training who went out with their mom. Why don't we roll this clip? It'll give us an idea of what the feel is out there.
Tell me what it was like to vote today.
I didn't get to.
Why?
I got a provisional ballot. I got to go fill out a provisional ballot because I've been taken out of the system as inactive.
Why is it important to vote today?
Because I want Uncle Don to take another 4 years.
We are here to vote down in Willingboro at the JFK Center because it's important. It's important to show that our voice matters, but also to show that our next generation understands.
And to vote for our new next president and try to end this ozone layer hurting and the 2020 coronavirus census.
Yes, so we are voting for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, blue all the way down, Senator Cory Booker and Congressman Andy Cap. So go out and vote. Hopefully you feel like you've served your purpose and continue to
Save the world.
save the world. There you go.
There you go. We're all going to save the world. We had our little voter in training who is very knowledgeable, I'd say, about who's on the ballot. Good for him. That's sweet. So, Carol, when you were talking to people today in Burlington and Camden counties, like what else were you hearing out there? What was getting people excited? Were they very willing to tell you who they voted for? The 2 clips that we played, they told our colleague Adam Monticelli very easily who they were voting for. He has a kind face, I guess. But what were they telling you?
Mostly they told me their preference. So the example of the woman there with her son, I always tell them ahead of time, you know, I'm going to interview you. I tell them what I'd like to ask them. And then I always let them know that if they would like to say something about their preference, they can, but there's no pressure to do that. It's strictly up to them. Most people do agree to do it. Mm-hmm. Some avoided saying the president's name. They would just refer to him as the president or he. For whatever.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Other people were a little bit reluctant to say too much, but they did give me an indication that they were going to vote either for the president or for Joe Biden, or in some cases intimated that they would vote for perhaps an independent candidate without actually telling you. There was a gentleman in Evesham who was a longtime Republican who did not vote. He voted in the last election, but he did not vote for either Hillary Clinton, nor did he vote for Donald Trump. And he said he was going to do the same thing this year. He wasn't voting for either major candidate, intimating that he would be voting for an independent candidate. And when I asked him why that was, he said that there were major differences among members of his family about who to vote for. And he didn't want to upset any members of the family, so who might have disagreed with him. And so he decided that he wasn't voting for either of the major candidates. And there are voters out there who are not excited about either major candidate and who are going to either maybe not vote, but probably vote for an independent candidate and likely vote for other candidates as well.
It sounds like this man was just trying to position himself to have the pick of like the Thanksgiving dinners coming up of where he wanted to go. He didn't want to anger anybody. He just wanted to get that wishbone. I heard from several women actually in Camden County. They were waiting in line. We showed that footage already. And the word that just kept coming up, I just said, like, why are you waiting in the cold for this? And they just kept saying important, important, important. And like another woman in line yelled, she was like, it's 2000% important. And I was like, okay. So it is important. You know, I really like to talk to voters in line. It's one of like my favorite things because there is like a little bit of magic about being able to make a decision for yourself that you don't have to explain to anyone. You seal it up, send it in the voting booth, you close that curtain, but behind you, make your choice. That is on you. You get to do whatever you want. And I really just think that's like magical America. I'm starting to get the feels over it right now. But so we are also following, as a newsroom, we're also following our 3 South Jersey congressional races. We have Donald Norcross, who's being challenged by Collingswood's Claire Gustafson. We have Jeff Van Drew. He famously switched parties, I think in December. He was a Democrat, became a Republican. He's being challenged by Amy Kennedy and a few others. Believe they're independent and a libertarian. And Andy Kim in the 3rd district, he's being challenged by several folks, including Republican David Richter. Carol, did you find anybody who had strong opinions about these races, or were they just really focused on the presidency?
Not one voter mentioned any other candidates except the president, or they just said we're going in to vote. So they were not discussed at all. The focus, the concentration seemed to be on the top of the ticket.
Ben, what can that tell us about the outcomes of these races? And do you have any predictions about how they could go? Any predictions of your own?
Well, look, first of all, I think we need to recognize that in 2020, the top 3 issues for voters are Donald Trump, followed by Donald Trump, and then the 3rd issue being Donald Trump. He has dominated the thing. Now, what has happened is that your opinion on the president is so baked in, whether you like him or don't like him. It's already there. You don't have to even advertise it. You don't have to really talk about it because it's like an ingredient that's already in your Duncan Hines cake mix. It's already in there. You don't have to add it. And so Democrats are talking about healthcare and COVID, and Republicans want to talk about law and order or something else, because you don't have to mention Donald Trump. It's already in there, but it is top of mind for virtually every voter. And what we can say is that in a very highly partisan, very highly politically charged election like we have now, it's not likely we're going to see a lot of ticket splitting. So you're not likely to see a lot of people who vote for Trump and then vote Democratic, or vice versa, vote for Biden and then start voting Republican. There are fewer and fewer of those kinds of voters, especially in a year like today. And so it doesn't surprise me that when you guys went out to the polls and were talking to people, they're talking about the president. That is the big issue here. And I think in terms of predictions, we can just think that if the president wins in that town or that election district, the Republicans will do well. If Joe Biden does well in that district or that town, then the Democrats are going to do well in that district or town.
Yeah, so speaking of those candidates, we already mentioned that they're not holding their usual election night campaign events. And knowing that it's going to be a while till we have days until we have someone who's either conceding or someone who's declaring themselves victorious. Ben, what do you think these candidates will be up to in the next couple of days? You kind of hinted on this earlier, saying that they're going to be asked to comment by people like me and Carol quite a bit over the next couple of days about how they're feeling. So, like, what do you think they're going to be up to? Just, pacing, or is there more work to be done? I mean, you can't do more campaigning now. What's the point?
No, but look, I think the key thing for everybody, and this is just good citizenship, is to count all the votes. Everybody wants every vote to be counted. They want every proper, legally submitted vote to be counted. And so that'll take a little bit of time. And I think the candidates are going to be asked to say something. And if it's too close to call, as we might see in some of the more competitive congressional races around the state, then we'll just have to wait to find out. I mean, you referenced, Congressman Andy Kim. 2 years ago, when he won his seat over the incumbent Tom MacArthur, we had to wait several days before all the votes were counted, and then you knew whether Andy Kim could win. So no one was conceding. Everybody will wait. The votes will be counted. A concession isn't necessary. It's a nice thing to do, like saying hello or goodbye, but it's not. It doesn't determine the election. The vote determines the election.
Sure.
And so I think candidates are going to be watching it. Their teams, legal teams, are going to be watching to make sure. There are outside groups that may well file suits. So we'll have to see about that. But for the most part, everybody's just trying to breathe, stay calm, and count the votes.
So let's look forward very briefly to 2021. Governor Murphy is up for re-election. The whole legislature is up for re-election. We geeked out about this earlier at the thought of it. We were just delighted at all the politics, the state home politics that are going to be going on. What can today and 2020 kind of hint about what's to come in the next year?
I think there's a couple things. First of all, if we continue with the vote by mail emphasis, where every registered voter automatically, doesn't have to request it, automatically gets the ballot, then we will see significant turnout. And I think one of the questions we'll have to ask once we're done with this election is, did the public like it? Did they prefer this over what we did last year? And that'll be something that where 2020 affects 2021. It's often said that the gubernatorial race following a presidential year starts tomorrow, starts the day after Election Day. And in fact, is even now, it's already started. Bill Murphy's been on TV, or at least his super PAC has been paying for commercials where he's in the baseball stadium talking. This is a guy, a governor we had that in January, 20% of the public didn't know who he was. And now everybody knows who he is. So his approval ratings have gone through the roof, above 60% in terms of how the public judges his handling of the coronavirus. This has elevated him, pushed him forward in a much different way. Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican former assemblyman who ran for governor 3 years ago, but lost in the Republican primary to Kim Guadagno, already announced. So this gubernatorial election for next year is already well underway. One final thing, if New Jersey and Virginia are the only states that have off year that is not in an even year, odd number year gubernatorial elections. And so depending on who wins the presidential race can seriously affect that party's base here in New Jersey. If Donald Trump wins re-election, Democrats in New Jersey, of which there are a lot, are going to be very agitated. And even if they don't like Phil Murphy that much, they're not going to want to let a Republican win. It'll be a very motivated base. If Joe Biden wins, Democratic support enthusiasm might be tempered down a little bit for a re-election, and the state turns decidedly more purple in terms of how voters might consider it. So there are some impacts that we can see from 2020 to 2021.
That's really interesting. And I know, Ben, like you and I will have many, many discussions up until this time next year as we work through that. I'm sure we'll have another show. And I'm sure Carol will join us. So look, I just made all these safe predictions. That's pretty good. Do you guys have any final thoughts for the next couple of days? Just how you'll be thinking about the results as they come through. Just trying to keep yourself like calm, just because I know like I want to know what's happening. How do I not, when you're waiting for something, you can often make it worse for yourself. What do you think? Go ahead, Carol.
I know it's going to be difficult, but I think people need to be patient. This can be tedious in some states in terms of the count. And I know here in Burlington County, the count will not be finished tomorrow. And every day they're hoping to have, at a certain time of day, release the latest results. So I think we just need to be patient and take everything in stride. And hopefully at some point we will get the final total. So that would be my advice.
Okay, patience from you. I will try that. I'm very impatient. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, so just a couple of things, and not to get too deep here, but everything in our society right now goes faster and faster. You want instant messaging. You want news that are 24/7. We all have some kind of smartphone that tells us right away, and I have to check it whenever I'm not doing anything else. There are certain things that cannot be rushed. Usually that involves giving birth or mourning the death of a loved one. And it also is going to involve this election. It can't be rushed. You simply have to do it. And I think we can, in addition to the patience, I absolutely agree with Carol, but we should recognize more people are going to vote in this election around the country than have ever voted in the history of this republic. I mean, what we are engaged in is one of the great exercises of representative democracy. So great that half the world wants to come here to be a part of it. And so if we can have some perspective on what we have engaged in through today, we no longer have an election day. We have an election. People have been voting for weeks. But I think it's just significant to recognize what we've done and to appreciate this massive undertaking that our country is now looking forward to completing.
So as you know, we are all over the place covering everything imaginable. Head to our website. We are NJ Press Pass is a combined effort. Courier-Post, Daily Journal, Burlington County Times. I am updating starting at 8 o'clock. I am the curator, making sure that all of the freeholder election results in our 4 counties, that's Burlington, Camden, Cumberland, and Gloucester, will be updated on an elections tool on all of our websites. We have our gents covering Congress. We have Jim Walsh, George Wilson, and Joe Smith covering the congressional races, and they will have reactions from candidates. We actually already have some comments from candidates up in the Kim Richter race. That's already up on all 3 of our websites. So there's a lot of content there, and we're happy to bring it to you, right, Carol?
Exactly.
So that is our, I guess, prime time dinner show for tonight. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Ben and Carol, for your expertise.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carly.
Thank you, Carly.
And I'm always happy to share my press pass with you on NJ Press Pass, especially on election night. And remember, here on this show, I'm always asking your questions. So make sure you stay curious, South Jersey.